You good? You ready? All right, man. Emmeline will know of your courage. They all will.
Remember me, man.
Always, brother.
Survivors of a forced quarantine, fixated on revenge against a government who brutally imprisoned them, and a society that stood by and let it happen. The Outcasts are a cult of fanatical, sadistic survivors who seek to cause pain and suffering through any means necessary. Not long after the green poison found its way into Washington, D.C., the JTF set up a quarantine on Roosevelt Island. The sick were brought here to give them a greater chance of receiving medical treatment they needed, but also to assist in stopping the spread of the virus. Although they were essentially on lockdown, forced to stay on the island, a lot of them understood that this was for the best of intentions, for the safety of their families and the community around them. The JTF and medical staff ensured that they were properly fed and all necessary medical supplies were provided. It was just like a gated community, the exception being they couldn't leave. Completely reliant on the personnel on the other side of the gates, they trusted and believed everything they needed would be provided. However, they also had no foresight into what was happening off the island. As the situation started to deteriorate on the mainland, the Roosevelt quarantine community had no idea. They just never saw it coming. The officer in charge of quarantining and safeguarding the people on the island was Colonel Antoine Ridgeway. Ridgeway could see what was happening on both sides. He witnessed firsthand the sick get sicker and their numbers increasing. Outside of Roosevelt Island, he watched as the security forces quickly lost control of Washington, D.C., and new society was on the brink of collapse. As resources going to Roosevelt Island started to drop off, Ridgeway decided that enough was enough. The government was going to lose control of the city, and the sick were a lost cause, and priorities needed to change drastically. He ordered his men to up the security detail around the island, and to strengthen the quarantine walls. However, it was the next action as commanding officer of Roosevelt Island that would change things forever, and for the community put under his care. Ridgeway ordered a cease on all supplies from entering the quarantine zone. No more food, water or medicine was to be administered. He was leaving them to die. Immediately, the consequences of this were felt within the quarantine zone. People noticed that medical personnel stopped visiting, and JTF members became non-compliant.
We're running out of food and water. We don't have enough blankets to go around.
Yeah, things are tough all over.
People are dying.
No shit, motherfucker. It's the fucking apocalypse.
I bet you're still getting rations.
Damn straight, I eat like a king.
You're diverting supplies meant for us, aren't you?
Don't look at me, man. I ain't diverting shit. I'm just trying to do my job.
As a period of time passes, starving and running out of ideas, a group within the quarantine discuss overthrowing their captives. They noticed a reduction in guard activity and decided to act on it.
They're afraid of us. We can use that against them.
They have assault rifles that they can use against us.
We're going to die here if we don't do something.
Committing suicide isn't really solving the problem.
We can win if we take them by surprise. There's only a handful of guards left on the island.
Great. You're taking her side?
There's only one side, and we're all on it. We were put here.
Rallying a number of people from the quarantine community, an individual called Emmeline managed to create an uprising to overthrow their captors.
What are we supposed to do now?
Seek justice.
How?
Relentlessly, and without mercy. We were victimized, but we don't have to remain victims. We were imprisoned, but we don't have to remain prisoners.
You can say whatever you want, but does it mean we can do anything about it?
Our enemies are right across that river. They tore us away from our families, locked us in here, starved us, deprived us, assaulted, and murdered us. But it's not just them. It's also the ones who signed the orders, who decided this was an acceptable solution. And it's the ones, all the ones, who stood by and let it happen, doing nothing. I want justice, and so I condemn them, all of them, and I will not rest until they are punished.
Emmeline and her daughter were brought to the quarantine on Roosevelt Island early on in the outbreak. She was forcefully separated from her daughter during the quarantine, and she later learned that she had died due to mistreatment. The trauma of this event built the foundation of what would later lead to the birth of the Outcasts. Shaw is a charismatic yet manipulative speaker. She has a way of swaying others' opinions and playing on people's emotions which trigger their wholehearted support regardless of all reason and rationale. Abandoned by the people who had sworn to protect them, and the brilliant persuasiveness of their new leader Shaw, these survivors became united in their quest for survival and revenge against those who had wronged them. As their numbers grew, so did their voices, and in time it became easier to convince others to take up arms and support their cause. At a time when guard numbers were particularly low, Shaw rallied her newfound supporters and broke free of the quarantine. Using whatever they could find, they took care of the remaining JTF forces on the island.
Is this the one from the boat?
Yeah. Try jumping overboard. We fished him out of the river.
What happened to his nose?
He wouldn't stop jabbering.
Get that gag off him.
Fucking murderers! Now there's a pot talking to a kettle.
You know what happened here, don't you, soldier?
Colonel Ridgeway was arrested for that. We were bringing you supplies.
You mean to tell me you never heard a single rumor about how bad things were here? Your guilt is clear.
While everyone was feeling empowered and free of the shackles put in place by the government, Shaw continued her preaching on the current situation they were in, how they were on their own, how the government left them to die, and that everyone else in society just sat back and let it happen. Any one of them could have made a stand and fought for them, but didn't. Therefore they are just as guilty as the government. We've all suffered losses. We've all been treated like feral animals. We need to make them suffer, like we have. No one is exempt. Lacking the other faction's access to modern weapons, the Outcasts had to make do with what they had at their disposal. Examples of these are their homemade flamethrowers, Molotov cocktails, and the remote control cars fitted with skill saw blades. On top of this, they can be seen using bows, assault rifles, close combat weapons, basically anything they could find or loot off other factions. To easily identify each other, members of the group wear scarves, bandanas, shirts, and even hoods made from the yellow quarantine plastic taken from their camp. It was during this time that Shaw found out that she is a rare asymptomatic carrier of the virus. She doesn't suffer from the side effects of the virus, but still carries it within her body and can easily transmit it to others.
I didn't think it was possible for someone to be an asymptomatic carrier of smallpox. But green poison also isn't a natural strain of the virus.
But why do you need a blood sample?
We're going to use it.
To make a vaccine?
To make a weapon.
To infect people?
Of course.
Good.
This only adds to the cult-like behaviour of the group that was starting to form around her, but also it provides the Outcasts with a new strategy in their mission to create havoc in Washington DC. Basically their main objective stays the same, except now with Emmeline Shaw as their leader, they have an endless supply of the virus, and their strategy of how to inflict the most pain has changed. The goal was to spread the dollar flu throughout the healthy citizens of the city, a second outbreak of the virus that started it all. The Outcasts roam the city and indiscriminately kill and infect other survivors, as revenge for the mistreatment they suffered at the hands of the government while forcibly quarantined, especially the closest settlement, the campus. With this newfound weapon, the Outcasts started coming up with creative yet sadistic ways of infecting the healthy. In one instance, there was a leader nicknamed the Brutal, who injected puppies with the green poison and then released them near an elementary school.
Oh, god damn, it stinks!
Of course it does. What do you expect?
How many of them in there?
I don't know. 15? I wasn't counting.
You kill them all?
We left one girl alive. We'll send her off to the campus to tell them what she witnessed.
That's good thinking.
Emmeline's idea, not mine.
The Outcasts' relationship with other hostile factions isn't particularly surprising. They loathe the True Sons, as they were the ones who were directly involved with their imprisonment and suffering. Yet despite this, they're not actively at war with them. Perhaps there is an understanding that they are simply too outgunned to take on the superior training and equipment of the True Sons. However, they can still be seen attacking patrolling units and executing survivors.
You're fixing to piss me off. Miss Emmeline?
Is this the wretch you spoke of?
Yes. He surrendered after we killed the rest of his squad.
I didn't do nothing to you people. I wasn't even in DC till a month ago.
You don't seem very loyal to your commander.
Lady, I'm just trying to survive. True Sons seem like the safest bet.
Is that so?
I got no allegiance to them. I can be useful to you.
You expect me to trust a man who would switch sides so easily?
Give me a chance. I'll show you.
Send his head to the general. Let the river have the rest of him.
In-game, we first meet the Outcasts in the DCD headquarters. They've set up a lab there and are using this facility to produce smallpox samples that they plan to spread throughout the city. The Division makes short work of this, destroying the lab and virus samples. Next we find them at the Potomac Event Center, where we're tasked with capturing the Outcast strategist. Again, they were quickly wiped out. After several more defeats at the hands of the Division, the Outcasts fall back to their final stronghold, where it all began, on Roosevelt Island. After a grueling fight, the Division finally found Emmeline Shaw as she was being escorted onto a boat to escape the area. But after a last-ditch effort involving wave after wave of Outcasts, the Division managed to detonate the explosives on the boat, along with Emmeline Shaw. The Outcasts were absolute in their devotion to their ideals, even if it was to spread death, disease, and misery wherever they go as revenge against the society that let them suffer. I'm almost completely certain that we haven't seen the last of the Outcasts, and even Emmeline Shaw. The last we saw of her just seemed a little bit off to me. We saw someone being escorted onto a boat, and we assumed that it was her, but we didn't actually see her up close. Even during the final fight, we didn't get to hear a peep out of her. I'd somewhat expect a final word, or a preach of how they were just in what they were doing, or something along those lines. In fact, we didn't encounter her throughout the whole stronghold. I wouldn't be surprised if she was long gone from the island before we got there. I will be covering the Outcasts more in a future video. There are just too many questions and things popping up that haven't been answered. For example, have you seen the secret underground owl room?
Plans in motion. We'll have to scatter to avoid detection. This may be the last meeting of the Moravian Society. We'll seal the site until another who knows the ritual can reopen it.
The Outcast came to be through an individual who was stricken by grief, who also happened to be charismatic and able to work on people's vulnerabilities in order to have them follow their beliefs. But given the situation they were in, sick, starving to death, locked off from what's happening in the outside world, having watched people close to you die because of the actions of people who are supposed to be looking after your well-being, if someone had a solution to the problem and managed to break you free from the prison, would you be somewhat open to the idea of following this person? After all, everyone else has just left you to die. Okay guys, that's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any leads on more information regarding the Outcasts, or any of the factions really, just let me know through the comments or through the NGN Discord. Cheers!
Where does it end?
Where does what end?
This.
It doesn't. It won't. Not for me.
It has to end somewhere.
It ends when I wake up and this was all just a terrible dream. And my daughter is still here, and she didn't die alone, calling out for me, or too far gone to notice I wasn't there beside her. Nothing can make that right. Not ever. And until it's right, it won't end.